The Great Hall of Concordance Prime was filled with representatives from over 40 species. The space station floated in neutral territory, far from any single empire's control. It was here that the Galactic Assembly met to discuss matters of war and peace. Today, the mood was heavy with fear. Commander Cole stood near the back of the chamber. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and calm eyes that had seen too many battles. Beside him stood Lieutenant Maya, his tactical officer. She was younger, sharp, and always watching everything around her. At the center of the hall, High Counselor addressed the assembly. He was a thin creature with pale blue skin and 4 arms that moved constantly as he spoke. His voice echoed through the chamber. The Dominion has conquered 17 star systems in 3 cycles. They have destroyed entire civilizations. Now they demand that we surrender 5 border systems or face total war. A wave of anxious whispers spread through the crowd. Watch the reactions carefully. Most of these species had never known real war. They had advanced technology, powerful shields, and diplomatic traditions that went back thousands of years, but they had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival. Ambassador approached quietly. The was covered in soft gray fur, with large eyes that seemed to take in everything. He had spent years studying humans but had never seen them in actual conflict. Your people seem remarkably calm, Commander, observed. They have destroyed species far more advanced than humanity. Does this not concern you? Glanced at him. It concerns me greatly, Ambassador, but concern and fear are different things. High Counselor continued his speech. We must consider this demands carefully. Perhaps if we give them what they want, they will stop their expansion. War would cost too many lives. Several representatives nodded in agreement, felt Maya tense beside him. They want us to give up 5 systems, she whispered. Millions of people live there. We would be handing them over to slavery or death. I know, replied quietly. A representative from the collective spoke up. Her crystalline body reflected the chamber's lights as she moved. They are too powerful. Their fleet numbers in the thousands. Their warriors know nothing but combat. What choice do we have but to negotiate? More voices joined in agreement. The fear in the room was growing. Had seen this before, in different places, in different times. Good people talking themselves into surrender because they could not imagine any other path. He stepped forward. High Counselor, I request permission to address the assembly. His 4 arms stopped moving. He looked at with something close to annoyance. The human representative wishes to speak. Very well, though I wonder what wisdom a species so young could offer. Walked to the center of the hall. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. He stood straight, hands clasped behind his back, and spoke in a clear voice. You are afraid. I understand that. They are powerful, cruel, and they have shown no mercy to anyone who stood against them. You look at your options and see only 2 paths, surrender or destruction. He paused, looking around the room. But there is a 3rd path. You can fight, not just resist, not just defend. You can take the war to them and make them regret every life they have taken. Counselor made a sound that might have been laughter. Fight the Commander, your species lacks the shield technology that even our civilian ships carry. Your weapons are primitive by galactic standards. What could humanity possibly do against the Dominion? Smiled slightly. It was not a warm smile. We do not hide behind shields, Counselor. We have never had that luxury. On our, we evolved as hunters. We chased our prey across vast distances until they collapsed from exhaustion. We learned that the best way to survive was not to defend ourselves, but to make sure our enemies could never threaten us again. The chamber was silent now. Even the whispers had stopped. They expect you to negotiate, continued. They expect fear and submission. That is how they have conquered 17 systems. They break your will before the first shot is fired. He shook his head slowly. Humanity does not negotiate with those who threaten genocide. We do not offer compromises to those who murder innocents. When someone attacks our people, we do not stop until the threat is completely eliminated. Watched from the edge of the room, his large eyes wide. He had read the human histories, studied their wars, analyzed their psychology, but hearing it spoken aloud in this chamber was something else entirely. An ambassador stood at the far end of the hall. He was massive, covered in thick scales, with rows of sharp teeth visible when he spoke. You speak boldly for a species that has never faced us in battle. Your colony on 442b lies within our expansion path. Perhaps you need a demonstration of power. Turn to face him directly. Perhaps we do. The laughed a harsh and grating sound. Then you will have one human, and when your people are burning, you will beg for the mercy you rejected today. We will see, replied calmly. The session ended without resolution. Representatives scattered to their ships, most already planning how to accept the demands, and Maya returned to their quarters on the station. Do you think they will really attack? Maya asked. Yes, said. They need to make an example of someone. They think we are weak because we are young. They think we will break like the others. Maya nodded slowly, and when they attack, looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, 3 million humans lived on 442b. Families, children, people who had traveled across the galaxy to build new lives. They saw them as targets, as lessons to teach the rest of the galaxy. When they attack, said quietly, they will learn what happens when you give humanity a reason to go to war. 3 hours later, the news came. Forces had struck 442b. 3,000 colonists were dead. The message was clear: submit or die. But humanity had a different message in mind, and the galaxy was about to learn that humans do not just fight battles, they annihilate their enemies. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, the unified military command center of Earth hummed with activity. Screens covered every wall, showing fleet positions, troop movements, and intelligence reports from across human space. Admiral Lane stood at the center of it all, her gray eyes scanning the data flowing past her. She was a small woman with short dark hair and a voice that could cut through any chaos. She had commanded ships in 3 different conflicts and had never lost a battle. Now she faced the greatest challenge of her career. Status report, she said calmly. A young officer approached. Admiral, the attack on 442b is confirmed. 3,200 civilians dead. The colony's defense grid was overwhelmed in minutes. Survivors are hiding in the underground shelters. Lane nodded once. Time since the attack. 4 hours, 12 minutes. And our response? The officer checked his tablet. 3rd Fleet is fully mobilized and ready for jump. 4th Fleet is at 60% readiness and will be combat ready within 2 hours. Ground forces are loading onto transport ships as we speak. Lane turned to the main screen. Show me the staging area. The display changed to show a star system 3 jumps from. Red icons marked ship positions, supply depots, and communication relays. It was a formidable force, enough to crush most species in the galaxy. They expected us to send diplomats, Lane said quietly. They expected tears and negotiations and eventual surrender. That is what every other species has done. Commander Cole's voice came through the communication system. He was still on Concordance Prime, but the connection was secure. Admiral, the Galactic Assembly is in chaos. Most species are already drafting surrender terms. They believe we will do the same. Then they do not know us, Lane replied. I am authorizing Operation Burning Dawn, full deployment to all known forward positions, simultaneous strikes across 7 systems. There was a pause. Understood, Admiral. I will join the fleet at the rendezvous point. Ambassador had requested permission to observe human military operations. He stood now in a corner of the command center, trying to process what he was seeing. In less than 6 hours, humanity had mobilized a war fleet and planned a multi-system assault. Most species took weeks to organize a response to aggression. Some never responded at all. Dr. Ellen Shaw approached him. She was a who had spent her career studying alien behavior patterns. Now she was helping the military understand the mind. You seem troubled, Ambassador, she said. Fur rippled with unease. I'm trying to understand. They attacked 1 colony, killed 3,000 people. A terrible tragedy, yes, but your response seems disproportionate. You are preparing to attack 7 star systems simultaneously. Ellen nodded. Let me explain something about human evolution. On our, we were not the strongest predators. We did not have claws or fangs or thick hide. What we had was endurance and intelligence. We became persistence predators. When we hunted, we did not stop until our prey was exhausted and could run no more. She paused, choosing her words carefully. That instinct never left us. When something threatens our survival, we do not just defend ourselves. We pursue the threat until it can never threaten us again. They killed 3,000 of our people. Our response is not about revenge. It is about making sure they can never do it again. On 442b, Sergeant Carlos Vega crawled through the wreckage of what had once been a school. His left arm was burned, and blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. Around him, the colony was in ruins. Fires burned in the distance, and the screams of survivors echoed through the smoke. But Carlos was not focused on escape. He was focused on the small device in his hand. It was a tactical scanner, and he was using it to record everything he could see about the forces. "Command, this is Sergeant Vega," he said into his communicator. "I am transmitting tactical data, landing positions, troop numbers, vehicle types, everything I can get." A voice crackled back. "Sergeant, you need to evacuate. Medical ships are en route." "Negative, Command. There are still civilians in the eastern sectors. I'm not leaving until everyone who can be saved is saved. But this data cannot wait. The staging area is visible from here. I count at least 40 transport ships and 12 cruisers." The data he transmitted would prove invaluable. It revealed the exact location of the forward command, the weakness in their supply lines, and the communication frequencies they used. It was information that would save thousands of lives in the coming battle. Back on Earth, Admiral Lane reviewed the data as it came in. "Good work, Sergeant. Get yourself to safety. We will take it from here." She turned to her officers. "Update the targeting priorities. I want their command ships hit first, then communications, then supplies. We take away their ability to coordinate before they even know we are coming." Watched in growing amazement, the humans were not just responding to the attack. They were preparing to dismantle the entire forward operation in a single coordinated strike. It was ruthless, efficient, and terrifying. "I reviewed your historical archives," he said to Dr. Shaw. "You have fought many wars among yourselves, brutal, devastating conflicts. I thought perhaps you had evolved past such things." Ellen shook her head. "We hoped we had. We built a united Earth, ended our internal conflicts, and reached for the stars believing we had left war behind. But we never forgot how to fight. We simply chose not to unless forced." The Third Fleet jumped to hyperspace. Aboard the flagship, sailors and soldiers sat in quiet determination. There was no cheering, no battle cries, just focused professionals preparing to do a terrible job that needed to be done. Cole joined them at the rendezvous point. He stood on the bridge beside Captain Lisa Morgan, watching the stars streak past. "They have never faced an enemy like us," Lisa said. "They do not know what is coming." Nodded slowly. "They thought they were the hunters. They are about to learn that they have become the prey." The fleet emerged from hyperspace at 7 different locations simultaneously. The Battle of Burning Dawn had begun. The defensive fleet had gathered in the system. 300 warships floated in perfect formation around their command station. Warlord stood on his bridge, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. His attack on the human colony had been a complete success. Soon, humanity would beg for peace like every other species before them. Then the alarms began. "Warlord," his communications officer reported, "we are detecting hyperspace signatures, multiple emergence points." And scales rippled with confusion. "How many ships?" "Counting now, 23. No, 47. Warlord, the number keeps increasing. They are emerging at 7 different coordinates around the system." The tactical display lit up with blue icons. Human ships, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and support vessels. They appeared everywhere at once, surrounding the formation like a net closing around prey. Captain Lisa Morgan commanded the destroyer Relentless from its bridge. She was a lean woman with steady hands and a reputation for taking impossible risks that somehow always worked out. "All ships, this is Morgan. Weapons free. Priority targets are command vessels and communication relays. Let nothing escape to warn the..." The battle began with a coordinated missile strike. Hundreds of warheads streaked through space toward the communication array. The station exploded in a brilliant flash, cutting off the fleet from any reinforcements. And roared in fury, "Return fire, destroy these insects." The ships opened up with their energy weapons. Green beams sliced through space, searching for human targets. But the human fleet was not holding still. They were moving constantly, weaving between attack patterns, using the debris from destroyed stations as cover. "They fight without honor," and snarled. "They do not hold formation. They do not face us directly." His tactical officer studied the display with growing alarm. "Warlord, they are not targeting our warships first. They are hitting our supply vessels, our fuel tankers, our repair stations." It was true. While some human ships engaged the fleet directly, others slipped around the edges of the battle, systematically destroying everything that kept the war machine running. Ammunition stores exploded, medical ships burned, command vessels lost their escorts and found themselves surrounded. Lieutenant Commander Saunders led the 7th Fighter Squadron through the chaos. His small craft darted between massive warships, delivering precision strikes to vulnerable systems. "Red Wing, follow me," he called over the radio. "Target that carrier's engine section. If we take it out, 3 of our cruisers have a clear line on the command station." His squadron dove toward the carrier. It was enormous, bristling with weapons, carrying enough fighters to overwhelm a small fleet, but had spotted the weakness. A section of the hull where the armor was thinner, where the engine core's radiation required special shielding. Anti-fighter weapons tracked them as they approached, watched 2 of his pilots vanish in bright flashes, but he kept going. "Almost there," he muttered, "just a little closer." His weapons locked onto the target. He fired everything he had. The missiles struck true, and the carrier's engines erupted in a cascade of explosions that ripped through the ship from stern to bow. But the explosion was too close. Shrapnel tore through his fighter. Warning lights flashed across his console as systems failed one by one. "Saunders, pull out," his wingman called. "You are losing atmosphere." Looked at his damaged craft, then at the battle still raging around him. Another carrier was moving to flank the human formation. If it reached position, it could launch hundreds of fighters against the vulnerable transport ships. "Negative," he replied calmly. "I have one more job to do." He aimed his crippled fighter at the second carrier's engine section and pushed the throttle to maximum. The impact was tremendous. His small ship punched through the armored hull and detonated inside the engine core. The carrier split apart, its threat eliminated. 20 seconds later, an escape pod ejected from the expanding debris cloud, floated in space, burned and bruised but alive. A human frigate moved to collect him. When they pulled him aboard, a medic rushed to check his injuries, just grinned through the pain. "Told my wife I would make it home," he said. "Just had to take out the trash first." Ambassador watched the battle from an observation vessel far from the combat zone. Dr. Ellen Shaw sat beside him, monitoring communications and providing context for what they were seeing. "This is unprecedented," whispered. "No species has ever fought with such aggression, such coordination, such complete disregard for their own survival." "We do not disregard our survival," Ellen corrected gently. "We value it deeply. That is why we fight so hard. A human soldier knows that the harder they fight today, the safer their families will be tomorrow." The battle lasted 8 hours. When it was over, they had lost 60% of their forward fleet. Their communication network was destroyed. Their supply lines were cut. Their command structure was shattered. Warlord fled on a damaged cruiser, barely escaping the system. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt something unfamiliar: fear. Captain Morgan surveyed the wreckage from her bridge. "All ships, report status." The reports came in. Humanity had lost 37 vessels and over 4,000 sailors. It was a heavy price, but they had lost far more, and they would never recover in time to stop what came next. "Admiral Lane," Morgan transmitted, "system is secured. The road to space is open." Lane's voice came back clear and cold. "Excellent work, Captain. All units proceed to Phase 2. We are not stopping until this is finished." The human fleet reformed and jumped to hyperspace once more. Behind them, the system burned with the wreckage of a defeated enemy. Ahead of them lay the heart of the Dominion. And they would not be offering any mercy until their enemies could never threaten anyone again. The Galactic Assembly watched in stunned silence as reports came in from across space. The species that had terrorized 17 star systems was now in full retreat. Human fleets moved through their territory like fire through dry grass, destroying military installations and cutting supply lines with surgical precision. High Counselor stood before the gathered representatives, his 4 arms hanging limp at his sides. He had been so certain that humanity would fall, that they would beg for peace like everyone else. Now he did not know what to think. "The humans have won the battle he announced. "They have pushed into territory and show no signs of stopping." A murmur ran through the chamber. The representative raised her crystalline hand. "They should negotiate now, while they have the advantage. Surely they do not intend to destroy the completely." No one had an answer. Deep in space, Commander Cole led a special operations team through the corridors of a conquered slave station. They had built these facilities on every world they conquered, holding millions of captives from a dozen different species. "Clear left," Maya called out, her weapon ready. "Clear right," another soldier responded. They moved efficiently through the station, neutralizing guards and releasing prisoners. The liberated captives stared at their rescuers with disbelief. Some wept. Others could not speak at all after years of captivity. Knelt beside a young female who had been imprisoned since childhood. She flinched away from him, expecting violence. "You are safe now," he said gently. "They cannot hurt you anymore." "Who are you?" she whispered. "We are humans. We have come to take you home." Across territory, similar scenes played out. Human forces did not just destroy enemy military targets. They liberated slave populations, provided medical care, and helped former victims rebuild their shattered lives. It was not what anyone had expected from a species at war. Maya coordinated the intelligence network from a temporary base on a captured asteroid. Reports flowed in from scouts, spies, and grateful former prisoners who wanted to help. "Commander," she called to, "I have something concerning. Intercepted communications suggest they are building some kind of on their outer moon of N. The transmissions mention something called the—" Studied the data, she showed him, "a planet killer. That is what it sounds like. They are desperate. They know they cannot win a conventional war against us, so they are trying to build something that can destroy entire worlds." Contacted Admiral Lane immediately. "Admiral, we have a priority situation. They are constructing a weapon capable of destroying planets. If completed, they could threaten Earth itself." Lane's response was immediate. "Location: the Moon N. Heavy defenses, orbital stations, ground installations. They are pouring everything they have into protecting it." There was a long pause. When Lane spoke again, her voice was flat and hard. "We cannot wait for them to finish building it. I am authorizing a preemptive strike. Task Force Delta will hit in within 48 hours. "Understood, Admiral." Warlord had retreated to the Dominion. His scales had lost their shine, and his movements were slower than before. Defeat had aged him in ways that years of conquest never had. He stood before a communication array and broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. "Creatures of the Assembly, hear me. The humans are monsters. They fight without honor, without mercy, without restraint. They attack our supply ships and medical vessels. They turn our conquered peoples against us. They do not follow the rules of civilized warfare." He paused, his voice rising with anger. "We offered them a simple choice, submit or die. They chose neither. Instead, they have brought death to our doorstep. They hunt us like animals. They will not stop until every lie's dead. Is this the kind of species you want among you? These humans are a plague upon the galaxy." The message spread across every system. Many species watched it with uncertainty. The humans had always seemed so peaceful, so focused on trade and exploration. Could they really be the monsters and described? Watch the broadcast from the captured station. When it ended, he turned to Maya. "He wants the galaxy to see us as villains," he said. "We should respond." "With what?" Thought for a moment. "The truth." An hour later, humanity broadcast its own message. It began with footage captured from liberated slave stations, prisoners in chains, mass graves, children separated from parents and forced to work until they collapsed, species reduced to cattle for amusement. The footage continued for several minutes. It showed 17 worlds worth of atrocities, carefully documented by themselves. Then appeared on screen. He stood in the ruins of a slave barracks, surrounded by freed prisoners who watched him with hope in their eyes. "We are not monsters," he said quietly. "We are the consequence. For centuries they have murdered, enslaved, and destroyed without facing any opposition. The galaxy looked away because it was easier than fighting. We are done looking away." He stepped forward, his gaze steady and calm. "We did not start this war, but we will finish it. Not because we enjoy killing, not because we seek conquest, but because no one else would stand up to stop the suffering." Behind him, the freed prisoners began to speak, and a dozen other species, all telling their stories, all thanking the humans who had saved them. "They call us monsters," concluded. "The people we have freed call us something else. They call us liberators." The message ended. Across the galaxy, opinions began to shift. Species that had planned to denounce humanity started reconsidering. Some quietly offered support, intelligence, supplies, safe harbor for human ships. The coalition against the was growing, and human forces were now just 3 systems away from the Dominion. The hunt was almost over. The human fleet arrived of the Dominion. Over 300 ships formed a ring around the planet, their weapons charged and ready. Orbital defense stations burned in the darkness of space, destroyed in the opening moments of the assault. Admiral Lane stood on the bridge of the flagship Liberty, watching the planet below. It was a harsh world of red deserts and black oceans, home to 8 billion. Somewhere down there, Warlord was preparing his final stand. Admiral, her communications officer reported, "We have established a blocking network. No ships can leave the system. They are completely surrounded." Lane nodded slowly. "Open a channel to the surface, all frequencies." The channel crackled to life. Lane spoke clearly, her words carrying to every corner of the planet. "This is Admiral Lane of the United Earth Fleet. Your military has been defeated. Your colonies are liberated. Your empire is finished. I'm offering you one opportunity to surrender. Lay down your weapons, release all remaining prisoners, and submit to galactic justice. Do this, and your civilian population will be spared." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Refuse, and we will dismantle every military installation on your world until you no longer have the capacity to threaten anyone ever again. The choice is yours. You have 1 hour." The hour passed in tense silence. Human Marines prepared for ground assault. Fighter pilots sat in their cockpits, ready to launch. Cole and his special operations team waited aboard a transport, their mission to capture an alive if possible. When the hour ended and response came, his face appeared on every screen, twisted with fury. "You think you have won, humans. You think we will bow to creatures who crawled from mud while we ruled the stars. Do not surrender. We would rather die than submit to lesser species. Every warrior on this world will fight to the last breath. Every weapon we have will be turned against you. Come and take our world if you dare. You will pay in blood for every meter of ground." The transmission ended. Lane closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with cold determination. "So be it, all units commence the assault." The Battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human forces struck military targets with devastating precision while carefully avoiding civilian areas. Schools, hospitals, and residential districts were marked as protected zones. Any human weapon that strayed near these areas was immediately redirected. It was war conducted with a scalpel rather than a hammer, and it confused them completely. "Why do they not destroy our cities?" a commander asked as he watched human bombers fly past population centers to strike a military base beyond. "They have the power. Why do they hold back?" No one could answer him. His team landed near the central command complex. They fought through waves of warriors, each encounter brutal and costly. 3 members of his team fell before they breached the inner defenses. And waited in his throne room, surrounded by his elite guards. He was old and tired, but he held a weapon in each of his 4 hands, and his eyes burned with defiance. "Come then, human," he growled as entered. "Face me yourself." The guards attacked, and his remaining team responded with trained efficiency. The fight was short and violent. When it ended and stood alone, his guards fallen around him. He lunged with a roar, disarmed him and forced him to the ground. Within seconds, the warlord was restrained, helpless for the first time in his long life. "Kill me," and spat. "Give me an honorable death." Looked down at him with an expression that held no hatred, no anger, only exhaustion. "No." "What?" "Death is easy," said quietly. "Living is harder. You will live, and you will live to see everything you built destroyed. You will live to watch your people rebuild under galactic supervision. You will live knowing that your species survived only because we chose mercy when you offered none." He pulled into his feet. "That is defeat, true and complete." The battle ended 3 days later. Military forces were completely dismantled. Their weapons were destroyed, their warships scrapped, their soldiers disarmed. But their cities stood intact. Their civilians went unharmed. Their culture, stripped of its machinery of conquest, was allowed to survive. Ambassador stood before the Galactic Assembly 1 month later. He had spent weeks among the humans, observing their war and its aftermath. Now he delivered his report. "I have studied many species," he began. "I have seen wars of conquest and wars of survival. I have witnessed brutality beyond imagination and acts of courage that restored my faith in sentient life. But I have never seen anything like what humanity did to the Dominion." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "They do not fight wars the way we do. They do not seek victory in the traditional sense. When humanity goes to war, they seek to ensure their enemy can never threaten anyone again. They are thorough, relentless, and absolutely committed to finishing what they start." He looked around the chamber. "But here is what surprised me most. When the fighting stopped, when they had won completely, they showed restraint that none of us expected. They spared civilians. They preserved culture. They offered rebuilding assistance to the very people who had tried to destroy them. Stepped forward. Humanity is not a species to be feared. They are a species to be grateful for. They did what we were too afraid to do. They ended a threat that had terrorized this galaxy for generations, and they did it while holding onto their compassion." The Assembly voted unanimously to offer humanity a permanent seat on the High Council. Weeks later, Cole sat in a quiet bar on Concordance Prime. The war was over. The dead were buried. The wounded were healing. He should have felt victorious, but mostly he just felt tired. A young approached his table. She was barely an adult, her gray fur still soft and untouched by age. "Excuse me," she said nervously. "You are Commander Cole, the one who led the liberation forces?" Nodded. "I am. I wanted to thank you. My mother was in one of the slave stations. Your people saved her." She hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What makes humans so effective at war? Everyone says you are unstoppable once you start fighting, but you seem so peaceful otherwise. I do not understand." Took a slow drink and thought about her question. He thought about the friends he had lost, the battles he had fought, the enemies he had defeated. He thought about his own exhaustion and the relief he felt knowing that his children would grow up in a safer galaxy. "We hate it," he finally said. "We hate war more than anything. We have seen what it does. We have lived through its horrors. Every human knows the cost of violence." He set down his glass and looked at her with tired but gentle eyes. "That is why, when someone forces us into a war, we make absolutely certain it is the last war they ever start. We fight so hard because we never want to fight again." The young considered this for a long moment. Then she bowed respectfully and left him to his drink. Sat alone, watching the stars through the window. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was rebuilding. Former slaves were returning home. They were learning to live without conquest, and humanity had proven something important to every species watching. They were not monsters. They were protectors, and they would always answer when the galaxy needed them.